Well, thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to get you on because for a long time now, since my early days working in some of my first jobs, I worked in some artisan wood-fired pizza restaurants. And so in that time, I developed a massive love for sourdough. I wasn't making bread, I was making pizza, but nonetheless, sourdough to some degree. And so as soon as I could get your book and have a read through it and the way that you broke everything down in such a simple way I've found amazing. I've actually loved it.
Thank you.
We'll get into the book, but I want to know, how did you, for everybody at home, maybe you can describe what you do, but essentially you're a cookbook creator. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's perfect. How did you get into it? How does, it's a pretty obscure job. Not many people do it, I would say. How did you get into it?
Yeah, it's funny. I always know how obscure it is because every time I tell people what I do, they're always so fascinated, shocked and interested. And so I'm like, oh yeah, this isn't actually an everyday job.
It's definitely not an everyday job. I don't know anybody else who does it. I potentially would have seen people online maybe, but no one that I can really recall. So I would say it's an obscure job.
Yeah, and I feel like today you could know, 10 people that have like a food blog or a food social media platform where they, create recipes and content, but the actually printing books is a dying art form that my sisters and I are trying to keep alive.
How so? Why is it a dying art form?
Just publishing's dying. People have all moved to digital. People have moved to ebooks, iBooks, Kindles. People don't buy physical books really anymore. Like everything's turned online. We have blogs now online. We watch YouTube. We have Audible. We listen to books. We listen to podcasts. It's definitely more rare that people will spend the money to purchase a physical book. I also feel like, people move around more. They rent. People want less things. Tiny homes is a thing. Living in buses is a thing.
The minimalist lifestyle.
Exactly. The minimalist lifestyle is really trending and has been for a while, which in that I think physical books are, one of the first to go. Lots of publishing houses, like publishing printers, publishing companies, like people that print physical books, shut down over the last 10 years.
Why? Why is that? Just for all the reasons you just mentioned?
Exactly, yeah. So now if you want to get a book printed here, it's very, very, very expensive because they're not printing many. And you need a lot of space, you need a lot of technology, so it's all gone offshore. So yeah, I feel like it's cookbook though. I think cookbooks are special. I feel like they're the exception to this rule. Like I feel like they're still holding strong because they're like an art form, like a piece of art that you can have on your table or on your coffee table, that you have forever. So I feel like cookbooks have stayed strong on this.
That is a really good point. Like when I think about it, going into other people's houses, particularly other people's kitchens, like if people are displaying books in their house, unless they have a library somewhere, typically they are displaying really beautiful cookbooks.
Yeah.
Right?
They're like a piece of art. Yeah.
That's a good point.
And people will pick that up and flick through it or you're more likely to go back to it, not just read it once and then have to store it. So I don't even know how I got into that route.
No, not at all. It's really important to understand this. I really want to know, how did you even get into this? You mentioned you and your sisters, but
that's the question.
How do you get into making cookbooks?
So my sisters wrote a cookbook when I was still at school. The nitty-gritty boring details are they wrote a cookbook as a hobby. Elise, one sister, wrote all the recipes. Lauren designed it, did the food styling and photography and editing and put it all together. And then they found someone to print it. So they printed 1,000 copies and it was just a hobby project because they both were really interested in those different areas that they worked on with it. And then they realized how much they loved it, so they turned it into a business, which I then joined with. So it just literally came out of like a hobby project in my parents' garage.
Right on. That's wicked.
While they were both studying and wanting to do other things, and then getting that book printed and seeing just the joy that it brought to people and how much people loved it. And then they were like, holy shit, we could do this full time.
So it was a side hobby that ended up taking off and becoming the main thing that they do.
Yeah, there was no plan for it to be their full-time job, let alone their full-time career and then my full-time career, let alone 12 years later, it's still being that for all of us. It really was a passion project that turned into a business, which is like the best kind of business. Like,
do you enjoy that work?
Yeah, I love it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So you've been doing that for 12 years. And how many books have you released?
Physical books, I think we've published 10 now. We've got different size ones. We've got like a bite-sized collection that's a lot smaller. And then we've, that's sort of like 15 recipes. And then we've got large cookbooks that are 90 recipes. And then lots of ebooks and digital books. We didn't completely ignore that
you still
market.
had to diversify?
Yeah, we still, for the people that just want digital and don't want physical, we have catered to them. But we all much prefer physical books and cookbooks, and so many people do with their cookbooks. So the joy is to have them all physical. We haven't been able to do that. Some are ebooks, but most of them were physical books first, and then we made them ebooks.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. Right on. And then the latest book that you've brought out, which if everyone could see on the camera is sitting over here right now, Simple Sourdough.
In the beautiful
looking sexy
cookbook stand that you built.
Yes. Yeah, if anyone wants cookbook stands, hit me up.
Yeah,
no, I'm
perfect.
kidding.
And they're actually really hard to find a nice one.
They are hard to find.
Yeah. Elise is very jealous of mine.
Oh, really? I might have to make her one. I don't know how many I've got in me to make, but I could
did tell her
make
that.
one more.
I said it wasn't done quickly or easily.
Yeah, it's definitely not my skill, woodworking. It's my father's skill, but not mine. So yeah, I got maybe
one way
one
to get
more.
better.
Yeah, it's true. I like talking instead. So what got you into creating sourdough and ultimately ending up in this book?
So I've always had a love and fascination for creating things from scratch. I really like, making things just from the raw ingredients. Say like, I won't buy hummus. I'll always make it. I'll cook the the dried chickpeas in the slow cooker. Like I love doing everything as back to basic or from the start process as I can.
Yeah.
Cooking with things that I've grown myself, which takes it even further back to basics.
Yeah.
And I also really like fermented things, and I have a fascination in gut health, and I love fermenting things. Sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles, just fermenting things.
All the good stuff.
Yeah, and I do believe it's so healthy. And when you make all this stuff from scratch, it's better for you, the environment, your health. And so I was basically making everything from scratch in my family. Like one of us was always kind of making something / everything from scratch except sourdough. And we were making yeast bread, but not sourdough bread. So that was something my family always still purchased. And that was kind of the only thing left that we did still purchase. So I was like, why are we doing that? Why are we buying sourdough? Surely we can make it. My sisters were like, no, it's too hard. It's too time consuming. Like that's just one thing we're not going to touch. And I just was like fascinated that the two best cooks I know in the whole entire in my life who have dedicated their life to cooking and writing cookbooks didn't want to touch sourdough. So the little rebel I am was like, okay, I'm going to do it. So that's where my love for baking sourdough myself came from. Really just from watching them purchase it and me not understanding why we weren't making it ourselves.
It's a good point, right? Because if you go into an artisan baker right now, you could drop $16, $18 on a loaf of bread, which probably will not be as good as something that you can make yourself once you know what you're doing, right?
100%. Even I think my worst sourdough loaf baked is better than stuff I buy.
I would 100% agree with that. It is so hard, especially in Australia. It is so hard to buy a good loaf of bread. It's almost impossible. It's all dog shit, but basically.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't want anyone in my family buying bread. I didn't want them spending the money. Companies still put chemicals and preservatives in bread to make it last longer, to be fresher. So you don't know what's going into it. You don't know what flour's used. You don't know what water's used. So that's another love for bringing everything back to basics, is then you know what exactly is going into it. And my mum taught me that from a young age of, if you can make something from scratch, then you know what goes into it. So she always said, and my sister says, eat dessert every day, just make it yourself.
It's a good point.
It's as long as you know what's going into it, then that's the most powerful thing. And then when I started making sourdough, I realized why my sisters hadn't done it. I was like, this shit is confusing.
Why so? Why? Because it does seem that the general consensus, if you speak to the average person, is they don't fully understand how it works. It seems like this really confusing, convoluted process. You have to be basically a trained chemist to be able to get it done.
I feel like every artisan sourdough baker just made a pact to not tell anyone that it could be done. Like, I feel like I've broken the silence code with simple sourdough.
You've exposed the secrets.
Exactly, that it doesn't have to be that hard, and the recipe doesn't have to be 5 pages long like all my beautiful sourdough cookbooks that I have.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be really complicated and confusing. We can bring it back and diminish a few steps and just make it doable for everyone.
And so for the person at home, I can assume that some people obviously know how to make sourdough, have given it a go at some point before, whether they've been successful or not. But for the person who doesn't really know, if you could briefly explain what is sourdough? Like, what is it?
Yeah, so I guess what we usually use in bread is dried yeast. We do dried yeast, a bit of salt, flour, water, sometimes some sugar, and then that will start a fermentation process. But instead of dried yeast, we're using a sourdough starter, which is something you keep alive, which is basically like a living, would you say like an organism?
Yeah, I guess it's a living organism. Yeah.
Of just flour and water that is fermenting away. You feed it flour and water every day. The bacteria feeds off that flour and water. Then it eliminates, which is like this gassy, bubbly stuff. And then that is what is making your flour and water, when you mix it with it, rise and grow and ferment. So you've kind of already got this like pre-fermented live mix of healthy bacteria that is then going to grow your dough instead of using a dried yeast. So it's pre-fermented and full of lots of healthy bacteria.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. And I feel like when people hear that, the fear is that they're going to be fermenting something and it's going to kill them, basically.
Yeah, you say bacteria to most people and they freak out.
Because germs.
Exactly. We've grown up only thinking that there's bad bacteria. But there are trillions of bacteria in the world, and there's so many good ones. Like, our body is made up of so many bacteria, and the more diverse our gut is with these different bacterias, obviously good ones, the better it is for our health.
Yeah.
And people freak out, like when you're growing something, you're wanting, it's full of bacteria and you're keeping that alive. But as soon as bad bacteria gets in there, for example, the most common one, mold, you'll know. You'll see mold straight away. And so then you chuck it. Like, you don't use it. You discard it.
So how long, I feel like another misconception is, if you're just making this starter, this yeast fermented starter from scratch, how long with just your flour and your water does it take to have a usable yeast product that you can make bread from?
10 days.
10 days?
Yeah. With my recipe, 10 days. Yeah.
See, I feel like before I gained a little bit more of an understanding, I had heard stories from different bakers from everywhere Every bakery seems to have a story about where they got their original starter from, their original yeast culture, whether they've had it from in this bakery for 100 years and they've never let it die, and that's what makes it so good. And so then people hear that story and they go, well, fuck, I don't have 100 years to make a good loaf of bread, so why bother?
Like within 10 days, you can make a delicious, beautiful sourdough loaf where the hype around like advertising how long your starter has been around for is obviously the longer you have it, the more bacteria and diverse bacteria will be in it. So
there's something to it still.
Yeah.
Like the longer you can keep that original product alive, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be stronger and it's just going to have a wider diverse of range of bacteria.
But it doesn't mean it's not going to work.
And if it dies, then you just make a new one in 10 days. Or if you know someone who has one, you can just like someone can easily give you some of their starter because you are chucking some out every day. Otherwise, it'll just keep growing and growing and growing. So if you know someone with a starter, you can get some of theirs.
So you can trade.
Yeah, well, don't even have to give anything back. You could just gift.
Yeah,
you could just take. But yeah, trading, if you have something to give that person, bonus, but you could just take.
And so an interesting part which I heard, and I would like if you can verify this for me or not, is the water. Okay. Do you have to use filtered water? Can you use tap water? What's the go with that? Because I've heard different stories.
So you do feed your starter every day with some water and flour and you use water to bake your loaf. You can use tap water. Purified is preferable because tap water is full of chlorine and many other things that we do not know or do know that are being put in the water.
Fluoride?
Yep. And that can kill off some of the good bacteria that is in your starter. So it's kind of like you're not going to kill it completely, but it's kind of like kicking it down every time you put like a chemical in there and one of the main ways it'll come from is the water that you're feeding it. So if you've got purified water, then it's less likely to upset the flow and growth of good bacteria.
It's pretty concerning.
Yeah, like it's crazy that we are a big fan of purified water. We don't drink tap water. And it's like, we wouldn't even feed sourdough starter with all these healthy, microorganisms and all these amazing bacteria in it that's so good for us. And the water that we are meant to drink every day in mass amounts, would affect sourdough starter and kill that healthy bacteria. And we're meant to drink that liters and liters by the day.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked up when you think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, if it kills a starter, who knows what it's doing to the bacteria inside of our bodies.
I haven't ever seen it kill a starter. People have said that it can.
But you haven't seen that personally?
I personally haven't seen that. I have read that and heard that. And I think obviously depending on where you are, tap water is different, and different things are put into it. But I haven't seen that happen in Victoria.
Because I guess
But it definitely would kill off some of the healthy bacteria, which the whole point is we want as much diversity of different healthy bacteria as possible.
Yeah, so wherever you are, if you're closer to like a water treatment plant, basically wherever they treat the water and they put these chemicals into it, if you're closer to that, the more likely that it's probably going to kill your starter.
And I don't know like what's going on in like Queensland, but fuck, their water tastes disgusting. So like I just can't believe that the same shit's in the water there that's in here. It's got to be different because like it tastes so...
It does taste way worse.
Foul. It's like... It's horrible. Like it is actually unpalatable, undrinkable. Whereas like tap water here, it's like it doesn't actually make me want to like throw up. So I haven't looked into it, but it'd be fascinating if you could look into and find out, which, whether you believe it, but like the information that you could find. But there's got to be something different in their water.
I'm going to look it up. I'm not going to do it right now, but I'm gonna write that down because
we should do a whole discussion on water.
What are they doing to you in Queensland? Sorry, guys.
Yeah, it's just I can't even describe it.
Yeah, right. So ideally filtered water, and then you have the best chance of creating the best product.
And like, flour, like milled flour, like bread flour that we use. Now most of them come with preservatives and things in them to extend the shelf life. So using a bread flour that hasn't got anything added to it, which is actually so hard to find.
Yeah, how do you find the right
just like,
sort of flour?
You look at the ingredients and it should just be wheat flour.
Yeah, right. Do you know what they put in it off the top? Can you remember what it is?
Oh, if you say if you look up bread flour at Coles,
okay,
and then it'll have the ingredients, and it's not just wheat flour. So you could have a look if you want, and there'll be like 3 other ingredients.
What?
So no, just look up Coles bread flour. Like go on Coles website. We're going to name and shame here. I'm picking Coles, and look at
Coles bread flour.
Yeah, and look at the ingredients in it.
All right, let's see what they've got here.
And those additives and stuff that they've put in with it.
Like plain flour? Or
nah, bakers or bread flour is what you need for
healthy baker flour. Oh, this is self-raising.
I mean, you could look at any of these flours and you'll see that they add things to it to prolong the shelf life, keep them fresh, if you could say anything is fresh.
Baker's flour. Let's see what they got. All right, here we go. Healthy baker flour.
What are we working with?
All right, so there's wheat flour, there's C minerals, which has in brackets source of calcium, and then we've got thiamine and we've got folate. So that's what's in it.
It should just be wheat flour.
Now, folate, I'm not going to be able to say exactly what this is, but folate is not good, right? Folate is not good for flour. It's an additive that they add.
Well, everything besides the
grain.
wheat flour is an additive that they've added to that because the government feel that, so like flour and, shit they add to milk and shit they add to water, they're making it their choice to put that in our diets for whatever reason. But so I always advocate of you just want wheat flour. That's all you want. You don't need the government supplementing for you subtly in these things, which they would say it's there for our health or for the longevity of the flour. So that can impact the product of your sourdough. But it'd be interesting to look up like all of those ingredients. But you just want a flour that just says wheat flour. You don't want anything else that's put in it.
So I'm really getting a sense just through everything that I've seen about what you post online, and this goes into the book itself in terms of a philosophy. And you mentioned earlier really going back to basics and having as much control over the entire process of what you consume.
Yeah.
Obviously it's difficult, it's hard, but it seems like that's something that you're really going for.
Yeah, and that's something that's passionate to my sisters and I with our business, Elise Alexandra, that it's not just cooking. Like, it's not just so you have something to eat. It's cooking from scratch is like our main philosophy. And the more that we do that, the more people can control what they put into their bodies, where they're sourcing their food from. So voting with their dollar more and understanding, what's going into their food. And then coming also from like an emotional point of view, it's like when people cook from scratch, it just brings people together and brings so much joy.
It feels good.
And like people, sit down, like people sitting down to a meal together is one of the most beautiful things. That's how conversations start. That's how stories are shared. But ultimately, we want to promote people cooking from scratch and then choosing the ingredients that they use when they cook from scratch.
I've heard an old wives' tale. I actually don't know whether this is true or not, but I've heard a lot of people say it, is if you're in another country and you get sick, you get like, your belly gets messed up, something like that, and you're not feeling too crash hot, what you should do is go to the market and cook like a meal from scratch that you would normally cook for yourself at home or something like that. And something to do with that process means that you're like putting your own bacteria into the food that you're cooking and then consuming it again, and it helps you like recover or build up an immunity to the area or something like that. Have you ever heard that before?
No, but it does make so much sense. Like,
I don't know if it's true, but I've heard it and it sounds good.
So yeah, that makes sense to me because it's like the bee hay fever thing where people that get hay fever, if they consume honey that has come from a beehive in the area that they live or they're around all the time, then their hay fever symptoms reduce because bees are pollinating and making honey, like pollinating all the local flowers, and then they are grabbing that and taking it back to their hive and making the honey. So like you're getting like small exposure to everything in the air that's like making you react.
Yeah, right. So it has to be honey like specifically from bees in your area.
Yeah, so say like
they're
you
eating
got
the
honey,
trees and the flowers that you're normally surrounded by and getting affected by.
Exactly. Like if you bought honey from, 100 Ks away or even 20 Ks away, those bees aren't making that honey and, flying around to all the plants and the food and pollinating everything. That's what you're reacting to. So it needs to be local honey to you, and then that helps give you just tiny doses of what you're reacting to with hay fever. So that kind of reminded me of it with your whole like cooking food philosophy and putting your bacteria in it.
I think it's a good philosophy. I don't know if it works, but when I heard it, it rang true to me. It sounds like it'd be a good idea. It makes sense. So
and even like when I talk about cooking from scratch and it makes the planet a better place because you can choose where your produce comes from, I'll just elaborate that on that a little bit, is you can choose to buy local produce. So then it's, you're cutting down food miles and not buying something from, if you're in Melbourne, buying something from northern Queensland that needs to travel for days and days, use petrol, probably frozen, so then it can be still, sellable when it gets here.
Yeah.
So you're choosing, so it's better for the environment because you'll be able to choose where your food is actually coming from. So you could support small businesses, or if you eat meat, I'm a vegan, so I don't eat meat, and as much as I think there is no ethical way to kill someone, I do think to kill animals there is different levels of fucked upness in the meat industry. Like,
of course,
every animal deserves to live, but I do believe, if you are going to eat meat, buying grass-fed beef that has, a certain amount of paddock or square meters per cow, like there are better ways to do it. So if you're cooking from scratch, where that meat's come from, or that you didn't buy caged eggs. So that's why it's better for your health, but also just better for the environment because you can make more sustainable choices with the ingredients you purchase. Or even buying in bulk. So then or buying stuff that only comes in paper bags instead of plastic. Not buying single-use items, not buying veggies that come in plastic.
Yeah.
So like every choice that, my favorite saying is like you vote with your dollar.
Yeah.
So every choice, every ingredient has a backstory and comes from somewhere that you can choose whether you want to support that industry or not.
For the average, and really good point, I couldn't agree more, and it sounds ideal to be able to live like that. It sounds like a great way to live. For the average person out there, I feel like when you look out, if you don't know too much about food, and especially if you don't cook from scratch, you're buying particularly more processed things and you don't have a good understanding about where your food comes from. For the average person listening to all this, it sounds so fucking confusing. It sounds like you have to be so educated to be able to just get yourself a healthy meal.
Yeah.
These days, and it's really frustrating because it seems like wherever you look, when you're walking down the aisle, you're walking through the shops, there's on every shelf, you're basically just looking at shit. You're just looking at stuff full of numbers, full of additives, full of poison, basically. And it seems like you have to work so hard and spend so much time to be able to get yourself a clean, diet, and then even on top of that, an ethical diet for however you feel about the world. Like, where would you suggest even like beginning with all of that? Because you work in this world, you think about it a lot, but for someone who hasn't thought about it before and they're only just thinking about it now, like, where do you fucking begin?
Yeah, good question. I think the first thing that came to my mind is, and this isn't accessible to everyone, but if it is, start shopping at a market, like a farmer's market. Start there, because anything and everything that you buy there, you can do no wrong to a point. Like, say if it's your first step, like obviously there is pastries and sweet things sold at farmers markets, but I'm just saying, if you just want to make one big change and then not have to think about anything else, just go to a market, go to a farmer's market. There's regular ones that are on every week, or there are pop-up ones that are on once a month. If you can access them, then you're so in the right place, because like you said, everything you described about walking the aisles, it's like that's scary, that's confusing, and supermarkets are just full of shit. Yeah. So starting to being able to shop at a market, you're supporting local, you're supporting small businesses, you're supporting food that hasn't traveled that far. It's less likely to be packaged. Normally it's, all in their single items.
Yeah.
And I just love that you're supporting small business. Like, you might be buying a pastry from someone that's just made 20 pastries that day.
Yeah.
Or you might be buying juice from someone that literally stayed up all night before just juicing. And they usually have like really cool, sustainable options where you bring the packaging back, or you bring the jar back, or things like that. Or they have reusable bags that you can, fill up. Yeah. And then they're also normally selling the produce this is something I really hate about supermarket produce is, unless it looks beautiful and like the perfect cookie cutter apple or the perfect cooking cutter carrot, they do not sell it, because people are so weirded out by, we've grown up where like everything has to look exactly perfect, and by perfect as in like what we've been seen in books or pictures is the perfect carrot or the perfect apple or the perfect peach. And then supermarkets will chuck out so much food because they're only going to put the pretty food on the shelf.
Yeah.
Which just kills me. Like, it all tastes the same. It's come from the same place. And so farmers markets, you'll just go get all the weird, abnormal looking fruit. It's still got the same health benefits. It's still going to cook the same. It's still going to taste the same. That carrot might just have like a little bit of extra carrot growing on the side of it. And so don't be scared by that. That's okay if stuff looks a little bit different. See the beauty of it.
It's not going to kill you.
No. And so normally farmers markets or markets, they're selling all their produce. So it's like there's so much less waste that goes into it. So that would be my first place to start if you can access or get to one of those. And even if you can't, weekly or every weekend, just picking one that maybe you have to drive a few hours to, but just make a day out of it and just like have that experience, talk to the people that are there, see how they operate, see what's around, and then that'll just really make you see the supermarkets for a different light.
100%. And there's an argument to be made that I'm sure a lot of people out there would feel like they just don't have the time and they just don't have the money, when it comes to buying more artisan food or going to a market. I feel like the general consensus is you're going to be spending twice as much money once you start going down that path, basically. Like, in your experience going to markets and shopping the way that you do, would you find that?
No, not at all.
No?
Especially with how much prices are increasing in big establishments and supermarkets. Like, they're constantly putting their prices up. You'll actually find that it's a lot cheaper.
That's actually so true. Like, there might have been...
going to the supermarket these days is not cheap. I hate when, and I do shop at the supermarket. I'm human. Like there's ingredients that sometimes I need and I go to the supermarket and the market's not open for a few days. And every time I walk in there, I just absolutely cringe at so much. But I get to the checkout and I'm like, what? This cost me this much? Like go to the supermarket isn't cheap. So that's what I would have to say to that. It's not cheap.
It's not cheap. I feel like it. Maybe at one point it was right. Like,
and I feel like fast food used to be cheap. Getting takeout used to be cheap. That is not cheap anymore either. Like, I don't like paying for a meal out when, especially like I love slow cooking. You can make so much and freeze it, have it for leftovers. Like I could make a curry that serves 8 people for like $15 ingredients. Whereas like you go buy a burger out and it's like $25 these days.
And it's normally dog shit now as well.
Exactly. Like fast food takeaway is not cheap. Going back to scratch will save you money. I
almost feel like people haven't caught up. I feel like I haven't caught up I'm just realizing this right now. Like I feel like when, Woolworths, Coles, these massive supermarkets opened and they could buy in mass amounts of produce and they could sell massive amounts, and it means that they could charge less for it. They could charge less than the average like small grocer or something like that, just because they have the capacity to buy so much and sell so much. So I feel like I'm still stuck in their mentality thinking that that's what they do. But you're so right. When you walk through the produce aisle in Coles or Woolworths now, it's so expensive. Like all the fruit and vegetables are expensive as fuck.
The produce is so expensive and it all comes wrapped in plastic and it all tastes the same and it's all got no nutrient value and it's just so expensive. And they get you on like, they'll have deals or like something that's really cheap. So you'll go in there for that really cheap thing. But whoever leaves the supermarket with just the one thing that they went for, like that's their marketing campaign.
They're designed to get you.
They're designed to get you. They will do the random few deals and cheap things to get you in there, and then you'll pick up 10 other things on the way that you didn't actually need or want, so then it wouldn't be cheap. And they purposely we had to learn this in marketing, they purposely put the things that people kind of go into like everyday things like milk, eggs, items that kind of everyone will buy, or like laundry detergent, but then body wash or something like that. They'll purposely spread them all out. So you have to walk across the whole supermarket to get the thing that you want. So then you're more likely to just pick up other things and buy it along the way.
Oh my God. You're so right. I feel like I've spent hours and hours walking around supermarkets not being able to get what I need, doing laps.
Yeah, and they do that on purpose. It's kind of even like the signs at the top of the aisles, right? There's like 50 things in that aisle and they have a sign that has like 4 categories, and I'm always like, with today's technology and like how is it so hard to find things at a supermarket? Like I don't care if I have to stand there reading that list for like 30 seconds, but give me more than 6 categories. Like give me more than 6 things that's in this aisle when you've got so many things. But it's because it's not meant to be quick and easy. They don't want you finding your ingredient quick and easy or the thing you're there for. They want you walking around so then you pick up more shit and buy shit. So maybe the one thing you went for is cheaper, but once you pick up all the other 10 things that you didn't actually go there for, it ain't cheaper.
You're so right. All the things that we thought were cheap are no longer cheap. And you said it perfectly with the fast food. Fast food used to be cheap.
And now they don't need to make it cheap because our society and the way we eat and cook and live is so obsessed with fast food because we've completely lost any, importance around cooking from scratch, that they don't have to make it cheap. It was cheap. It got everyone hooked. And now they don't have to because everyone's already hooked.
Well, people are so fucking busy.
Yeah, because we've got this, this crazy busy lifestyle. We've made this hustle culture. We've made it, a show-off feature the more you work. Saying like, oh, I'm just taking a day at home to make a lot of sauces and condiments. ain't sexy. Like that isn't what we do anymore. It's like
Yeah.
work hard, play hard, exercise hard. Like apartments these days and houses are being built with tiny, tiny, tiny kitchens. Like that's why
You can't do anything in them.
No, that's why I love old buildings, because they've always got big, beautiful kitchens, whereas now they're just making kitchens smaller and smaller and smaller because nobody's using them. And so it's like fast food doesn't have to be cheap anymore.
Just has to be fast.
Because we've got everyone hooked on it, and we've got everyone still stuck on the mindset as well that it is cheap. I tell you what, fast food isn't even fast anymore. So it's like we got everyone hooked that it's cheap and fast, and then now it doesn't have to be because everyone's just so reliant on it, and everyone's lost the culture of cooking from scratch, wanting to cook from scratch, being able to cook from scratch, knowing how to cook from scratch. So then fast food, yeah, they don't have to make it cheap anymore because everyone's already hooked.
And I've seen you whip up a meal in about what feels like 6 minutes that's way better than anything that you can get off Uber Eats.
Oh, every time
And a quarter of the price.
Yeah.
Every time.
Seriously.
Yeah.
The few, once a year where I've thought, I don't feel like cooking, and it is rare. I sometimes think, am I having a heart attack? And I get on, a delivery service and I'm like, 50 minutes for that meal. I'm like, I can make a meal and eat it in that time, and I'm just going to do it from, ingredients in my pantry. And yes, this is a luxury that I have because I know how to do these things, but I didn't always. It's just I valued enough to learn and practice and source the right sources, which is what at Elise Alexandra Cookbooks we try and do, is just be that source for someone. So we have like a Budget Busters ebook. We have a Quick Dinners cookbook, which is all cooked, like prepped, cooked, served in under 30 minutes. So it's like we try and just be that resource all in one spot so people don't have to look elsewhere because we've done the hard work for them. So yes, like I can cook up a quick meal and not everyone can do that, but I didn't always be able to. I just saw the value in learning that skill.
Well, it really seems like a whole lifestyle shift in a sense. As we're talking about it, I'm thinking, well, yeah, definitely you have to invest more, at least more time into learning how to cook, spending time probably cooking initially because it's going to take you long while you're trying to work it out. You're going to have to spend more time sourcing the right ingredients, finding out the companies or the producers or the suppliers that you like and sit aligned with your values and produce the food that you want to eat. So it's a real time investment initially to be able to get into it. And then I feel like that almost creates a whole another life. It bleeds into every other element of life because like the way I see it right now, and I felt like this as well, is you're working your ass off. For a lot of people out there, they're working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. They've got feeling like they've got no time. And if they've got time, they've got no energy. And so to even begin the process of developing a life where you're cooking from scratch and you're living more wholesomely, like everything that we've just described, it kind of forces you to take a look at everything, everything that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that for me. As soon as I started looking into these things, the first thing you go is, well, I don't have enough time. Where do I find the time? Like, why am I spending all my time and all my energy working where I can't even eat good food anymore? Like, I can't even buy good food anymore because it's all shit, basically.
Yeah.
Like, even if you've got money, if you're buying food, often you don't know where it's coming from and it sucks.
But also
Blows my
like there's
mind.
different amount, like there's so many different recipes. There's quick ones, there's short ones, or there's slow cooker recipes, which hands-on time is like 10 minutes and then it cooks for 8 hours while you go to work. So it's like, it doesn't have, like recipes don't have to be long and hard, like there's so many different types of recipes out there. It's just like finding where to find them, which is probably the more time consuming bit at the start.
And would you say another barrier to this, another thing that I feel like I've found on my journeys thinking about this is if your kitchen isn't set up, if it's not stocked, right?
Yeah, you actually just read my mind of what the next thing I wanted to say was.
Yeah, maybe you can take over from me, but yeah, like your pantry's not stocked, right? You don't have the right spices, you don't have the right herbs, you might not have the right grains sitting around. So then you jump online and you look up, or you go in a recipe book and you look up how to make a curry or whatever it is, and you go to Coles or you go to Woolworths, and then you spend fucking $70, $80 getting all the stuff to make this curry. And then people are kind of like, well, why the fuck would I do that when I could just order it on Uber Eats for $20 and save my time? It feels like unless it's something that you're prepared to do consistently, or at least build up those stockpiles, it might not initially pay off.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought of this before when you were like, when you said that you might have to pay more money up front.
Yeah.
And this came into mind that the first thing I say if people want to cook from scratch more is to set up your pantry and your spice rack. Because like you said, if you're looking at every recipe and you know that you have to go buy every ingredient, that feels really hard and daunting. Or like you said, you'll buy, a bag of rice, and then if you're buying all those ingredients, it does get expensive, and you're like, why am I cooking like this? Like I should have just ordered it.
Yeah.
But if you do it consistently, and then you have, if I had the time, my dream side job would be to go into people's kitchens and organize their pantries.
Is that a thing?
People do it for sure.
That's a job?
Yeah. It's like people organize clothes and houses and declutter. I would love to organize pantries. Like,
oh, well, we'll put your contact details up at the end so people can hit you up on the socials. If there's any billionaires out there who want an awesome pantry, please
exactly.
Call in.
So we are so passionate about this that we even have like a pantry staple list on our website, on our blog, which says like if you're just going to have like the most basic pantry, start with these things. And we have one for if you're vegan because it's a little bit different. Nice. And so setting up your pantry is the most important thing for sure, because one, when you set it up, it means if you use half the ingredient or half the bag of rice, you're not like, oh, like where do I put this? And then it gets like shoved in the back of a cupboard and never used again. Yeah. And then you forget it's there. So then you buy rice again, and then you buy rice again. I've seen you do it when the pantry's all in shambles and we keep pushing stuff to the back.
I've bought bags, and I buy a bag of rice every time I've got to use it.
Yeah.
I'm terrible.
But luckily we have the container. So I put it in the container that's labeled, and then we know when I need rice, I go to that container. So yeah, you just end up buying the same ingredients time and time again. Or if you're not keeping it in like a sealed container in a set up pantry, then it won't stay fresh. So then it's going to go rancid, or weevils can get in. And it's not like you need like a whole pantry. Like you could buy like or find on Facebook Marketplace, or buy from, IKEA, like a little trolley and have little things like lots of jars, and for a pantry as well, like you can go buy beautiful containers, but also every jar that you use, clean that out, and you can store rice and herbs and lentils and
so most of this stuff you can
flour.
do for free. Basically, like not obviously the produce, but when it
Yeah.
comes to containers and organizing and getting yourself prepared to set yourself up.
Yeah, jars are amazing because they're airtight. You can go to op shops and get like bags and bags of jars for like $1. So I always say set up your pantry, because then it's so much more inspiring and fun to cook from scratch when you know, oh my God, I only have to go buy that one ingredient. I've got everything else. And then label it. Label, because it'll start all looking the same and you'll be like, what rice is that? Is that a boru? Is that medium grain? So label it all. FIFO, first in, first out. So always use your oldest produce first, super important. That doesn't just extend to like fresh produce or dairy. It also is the same for your grains. That stuff, like the sooner you use it, the better.
Okay, yeah.
Like flour can go rancid.
Yeah, right.
Nuts, you know how much I hate
not the flour from
nut.
Coles. That shit will live forever.
Yeah, true. So yeah, I always say set up your pantry. It'll make cooking from scratch so much easier and so much more enjoyable, and have at least like your core like 15 spices, because nothing again is less fun when you have to go buy like 5 spices and then you have this little bag and you're like, what do I do with all this spice? And then you maybe whack a rubber band around it and throw it somewhere and hope that you remember that you've got that spice when you've got to use it again. Yeah. So spice rack essential, have your core ones down packed, and have your core ingredients there. And then like I have a Tupperware container that's like miscellaneous for maybe the things that aren't going to be around for a long time. But if I've got leftover of something that doesn't meet all the core other containers that are labeled, then I'll put it in there. So then I know, oh, if I'm shopping for a recipe or I want to make something, I'll check if I know what my staples are in my pantry.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So then I'll go check the miscellaneous box or tub or container. And so then if it's not in there, then I definitely know I don't have it on hand. So it's like the little bits that I probably don't want to stock all the time. It might be something like dried apricots and I had some leftovers. So then, or I'll go look at that and be like, what ingredients do I have that need using up? And then I'll tailor what I cook to use up that ingredient. And like we've got Google these days. If you've got green lentils, literally write in Google green lentil recipe and you'll get like the 100 recipes that use green lentils. So then there you go. You've used up that ingredient.
Yeah.
So that's another beautiful way to look at cooking is don't think, what can I cook? Just free thought. Look at the ingredients you have or your pantry or your veggie box, see what you have and then cook to use up that. That's like the best way to save money. And I'm really good at that. Like I can look at an ingredient and instantly know how I could cook with that and use it. But again, if you got a shit ton of eggplants, Google recipes that use eggplants and you'll get like 1 million.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to like cook to use up what you've got.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And for the average person transitioning into this sort of life, maybe they don't have, I don't know how much it costs to set up a pantry, but.
And this is the other thing. If you're setting up a pantry and you're doing it all in bulk beforehand, then you can go shop you can shop around online to find the cheapest prices. So say you want to stock up on all your rices or something, or your flours or your lentils or your grains, you can find the cheapest ones online, or you can go to like bulk food places like the Source bulk foods is a big one in Australia. And then you can take your containers there or your jars there and then buy in bulk. And then you aren't buying stuff in plastic and it's a lot cheaper if you take a container there and then buy it in bulk. So setting up your pantry means you can buy larger quantities of things, which is going to be a lot cheaper per, gram than buying small packets. Yeah. So again, it is more of an initial investment, which I understand people might not have. People that live a very tight, like paycheck to paycheck might not have that to outlay. Yeah. But you can also start off slow.
Yeah, like if let's say you don't have the money sitting around, you're spending what you earn at this point in time, especially if you're buying expensive produce from expensive places and you're getting takeout and you're just in that cycle. It sometimes feels like it's impossible to get out when you don't have a spare few bucks, basically. Would it be advisable just to, I guess you got to plan, right? You got to plan a little bit better and just start buying small amounts of this stuff. Like maybe your pantry won't be set up for a few months, but you just got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Or when you do buy that one herb, you then take that time to put it in a small jar and label it. So then next time you know that you don't need to buy ground cumin.
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe as you start cooking some recipes that you really like or want to cook, then the excess of that will start building your pantry instead of just, tying it up with a rubber band and just throwing it in a drawer.
Tell you what's crazy expensive as well, herbs, like fresh herbs.
Yeah.
I feel like you go in and a thing of herbs that most people don't use all of is so expensive. It seems like such a waste. I feel like if you could just grow some of that shit at home, it would make a big difference.
I always say if you're going to grow one thing and one thing only, grow herbs because they're so expensive to buy. They don't last long. So it's like you've got to use them up quickly. And they most of the time come wrapped in plastic if you're getting it from a supermarket. So if you're just going to grow one thing, make it herbs. And then that makes cooking so much sexier. Herbs are so healthy. We need more of them. They're full of antioxidants, a lot of them. So like if you're just going to grow one thing, make it herbs. They're easy to grow. You can grow them indoors. Like you do need sunlight, but it's not like they're going to, they can be in small pots growing on your kitchen bench, and that'll save you so much money and make it so much fun and sexier to cook. Because like you said, as soon as you get a recipe that you need mint or basil, it's like, oh, got to outlay like $7.
Yeah. It's the worst.
And then it doesn't last long.
Yeah.
So at least if you are buying it, do put it in like a glass of water. That'll prolong the life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a perfect thing to bring up is like if you can, a beautiful place to start is to also to just at least grow herbs. You know, like my if I had to pick 4, it would be basil, just like your classic, mint, coriander and parsley. They would be like the 4 staples that I would say to grow. And then mint also just for
mojitos.
Mojitos, that's what I was going to say. For cocktails.
For cocktails.
For cocktails, yeah. And then if you have a little bit more room, then maybe something like Vietnamese mint or Thai basil. If you like to cook a lot of Asian or chives or rosemary, thyme, dill.
Because you can cook a lot of things. Like you can, with not a lot of space, you can grow all of those herbs.
Yeah.
And each time you cook, you're only taking a little bit off anyway. So it's like if you have the tiniest little windowsill basically somewhere, you can most likely grow some of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
As long as you got like a little bit of sunlight somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like all around like the public parks, I don't grow rosemary is the one herb that I don't grow because it's just like huge. They become like huge. They can get to huge bushes. Yeah. And they're just everywhere at the local park. So yeah, I'm taking a few strands off and putting it in a vase.
Hide your rosemary, people.
Or, you know, you can divide and conquer. Maybe your neighbor will grow a lot of rosemary. So maybe, you know, mint grows like crazy. It grows like a weed. Whatever space it has, it will take over. So like you'd want it in a confined pot, not just like in the garden if you don't want to go in everywhere. Maybe you grow mint and your neighbor grows rosemary, and then that's when you can do what you spoke about earlier is a beautiful trade.
Exactly.
Trade your herbs.
And how do you feel about people buying produce that isn't seasonal? Because I feel like we're pretty used to, in this culture, buying stuff, well, number one, not knowing when anything's grown and actually grows throughout the year.
Yeah, I don't think anyone, like a lot of people don't even know what's seasonal anymore because we don't grow food anymore. Yeah. So like, and you see the same food mostly all year around on the shelves. So you're going to have no idea when that fruit or vegetable is grown. Like I don't blame people for not knowing because we see the same thing pretty much all year round. The only, you know, little hints that you can kind of have is it might get more expensive. So, you know, if they're bringing mangoes down in winter because mango is a summer fruit, or they're bringing it out of cold storage, you might see it go up a little bit and, you know, it's more expensive at different times of the year. That's the only kind of could be a little hint.
Because, yeah, it saves a lot of money, right? Like if you're constantly buying produce because you like it, but it's not in season for that particular thing.
It's going to cost a lot more.
It means you're getting it from a place where it is in season, basically. So the transport cost to get it to where you are is going to make it so much more expensive.
Yeah.
So having
they're bringing
having
it from somewhere that is in season, which means it's come from really far, or they've had it frozen and they're bringing it, or like in really cold storage. So then that costs a lot of money to store it, and then they're bringing it out of cold storage to then like finish ripening. So then you can get it right then and there. So yeah, it's going to, produce that's not in season is going to cost you a lot more. It's going to have less health benefits and it won't be as tasty because if it's in season, then farmers are growing so much of it. So they obviously have a higher quantity of produce, a higher yield. So they have more to sell, which like basic economics means price goes down because there's a higher quantity. Yeah. So they need to get rid of it because they're growing so much of it. So yeah, eating seasonally, so good for the planet, so good for your health, and another great way to, if you're cooking from scratch, keep those costs low.
Have you heard about once again, I feel like this is a thing that I've heard, but I've never looked this up, so I don't know. Have you heard about
They're the best stories from you all the time. You're just like, I heard this, base it on nothing. But I just love it. Like we should just have more conversations like that. Yeah, well,
it's now, you know, there's one thing talking about it with your friends, but when it's being recorded, you start thinking about where you've actually heard things and how you actually know things. And, you know, you start to realize, I start to realize like, I don't know where the fuck I heard this.
But it's also a breath of fresh air that you're willing to say it with the premise of, I don't know if it's true and I don't know, but let's talk about it. When so many people come from only talking about things with a steadfast, this is correct, I know this. And I think more conversation should be like, I've heard this, let's discuss.
We'll find out. And if we don't get it right on this one, I'm sorry, and I'll look it up another time. But have you heard of the nitrogen containers, nitrogen warehouses?
Like where they're like freezing all the food?
Where they basically get, I don't exactly know how it works, but essentially they pump it with nitrogen and it gets rid of all the oxygen out of these massive rooms. So then they can maintain like produce for ages. So for instance, an apple that you buy off the shelf in Woolworths could be like 2 years old.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's a couple weeks old. Have you heard of that? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I've heard of it, and I think that's a thing.
We're going to look up whether it's a thing.
Or even a good example of this, if you go to Costco, which is like, those big and like what would you call it? Like a big ass supermarket, but it's kind of got everything.
It's
but
like a mega store.
Yeah, it's like a mega store and everything's meant to be a lot cheaper there.
Yeah.
Well, they have fresh produce, but the fresh produce, this is the last time I went, which was maybe like a year ago.
Yeah.
Always good to just go suss out how other people are doing things. The produce, you go into these like, imagine like a big walk-in fridge. Like it's huge and there's just like big carts of like apples or peaches or whatever. So you can get your fresh produce there, but you're in there, it's like, it's freezing. It is so cold. Like it is icy. Like you just want to grab your produce and then just get out. And like, it's basically like what you just talked about. Like it's so cheap because they can just keep it there for so long and in such big quantities because it's basically frozen. And so like all the nutrients is just completely gone from it. And that's why it can be so cheap because they just stored in like, it's literally like you walk into a freezer and that's how you're buying your produce.
So by the time the whatever the fruit or vegetable is grown and then it's stored in one of these fucking containers for however long, and then it's been transported somewhere, it's been sitting on the shelf, and then you buy it for way higher than you should be buying it for, and then you put it in your fridge, and then you leave it there for a few days. By the time it arrives to you and you're eating it, I feel like the amount of nutrients you're getting is just completely gone.
Yeah. And that's why like all food these days, it tastes the same. Like it's like no food has flavor. Like when I eat a strawberry that I've grown, it's like the sweetest, most juicy, flavoursome strawberry. And you eat a strawberry you buy from the supermarket, and it just tastes. It's like it tastes like nothing. Or you eat a tomato and it just tastes like nothing. A homegrown tomato, I can just eat like an apple and chomp on because there's so much flavor. Whereas like everything just tastes the same because there's no nutrients.
Yeah, close your eyes and start eating the food that you buy from Coles and Woolworths and see how it tastes.
Just raw in its plain state.
Yeah, just close your eyes and eat it and see what you come up with.
And then like we haven't even gotten into, we're talking about what happens when the food is harvested. Like we haven't even talked about like the soil that food is grown from and how there's no nutrients in the soil and they're just churning through it, growing and not regenerating the soil and not putting nutrients back in the soil. So even if you might get to that tomato really quickly when it's harvested, what soil was it grown in? And if that soil hasn't been fed nutrients, given the time to regenerate, all your nutrients in your produce comes from the soil it's grown in. We got no nutrients in our soil. So if you grow your own food, you can control what nutrients you're putting into the soil it grows from.
Which is crazy. Yeah, I heard Sadhguru on a podcast because he's doing his whole Save Soil mission around the world. And
Love him.
And I heard him say that fact of, an orange in the 1920s, the amount of nutrients in that orange is the equivalent to like 7 or 8 oranges that you can buy now.
Yeah.
So to be able to get the right amount of nutrients, we have to be consuming like way more food to realistically get it. And then we don't need to go into it, but yeah, this is a whole trajectory down into what malnutrition causes in people in terms of different diseases across the board.
Yeah. And then it's like, it's a scary place to be because it's a double-edged sword, because you could be like, okay, I'm going to consume more fruit and vegetables. I'm going to eat the 8 oranges to get that vitamin C, like eat more. But then the more you eat, the more you're being exposed to the chemicals and the pesticides that they are putting on the food to grow the food. So like eating more in mass isn't a solution, because you're going to be consuming more pesticides and chemicals that are used to grow the food. So like you can't even take it as like, it's not as easy to just be like, okay, I'll just eat more produce, because if you're not eating organic produce, then a shit ton of chemicals are used to being grown it.
Whew. Yeah. Sounds dire.
So what I also love to say to people is, if you can't afford to buy organic produce for everything, then like there's a few key fruits and vegetables that if you could just buy organic for them, it goes a long way. So for example, berries. So many chemicals are used to grow berries. So, and same with tomatoes. So it's like there's a list online, which is like, if you're only going to buy, if you can't afford organic or you don't want to buy all organic, but at least buy these, 7 things organic. And I know herbs is a big one, I think.
Is it just like how much shit they absorb? How many chemicals they absorb?
It's more like how much they have to use, because that's a harder product to grow. So like berries are a lot harder to grow. Insects, pests, rodents, birds, like it's more like, what's hardest to grow, how they've got to protect those things more by using more pesticides.
Yeah.
So if you can't or don't want to buy everything organic, then there's just like a few key things that maybe buy those more if you can organic, so then you're not getting the chemicals from, like I know tomatoes is a big one. So you can look up that list online.
And
so yeah, eating more doesn't actually necessarily mean healthier anymore.
And it's hard because the way that I feel about it now, the lack, what's the right way to say this? It's so difficult to trust the sources of our food supplies, like we've just discussed, that even when I hear the word organic, I'm like, how do you know? Like, how the fuck do you know whether, even if something's certified organic, like exactly what does that mean? Like, how do we know that they're doing the right thing? Like in my mind, it feels that the only way that you can really, unless you're growing all of your food yourself, which just, let's be honest, in this day and age, is just not realistic for the average person, is the only or the best way to, when you go to these markets, potentially speak to the farmers, or actually speak to the people supplying your food, or try and find someone who you can speak to that can potentially verify where it's coming from and like how they're producing it and what chemicals they're using on it.
Yeah, like, definitely. I mean, like, I hope that we live in a world that if people are using those things, they'll at least be transparent about it. So
maybe the little guys.
That. Yeah. Also, like, a great sign is if there's a grower that has lots of produce that, they normally have like kind of a defective basket, or like you buy this bag and it's a lot cheaper because there's a few holes or nicks, like basically like that's more likely to be the healthier produce, because if it was affected by, if it doesn't look perfect, then it probably wasn't sprayed with a shit ton of chemicals. So kind of like looking for
so it's better to find like a little nibble out of your apple or something.
Yeah, it's
like that sometimes.
Well, if a worm wanted to eat it, it's good enough for me. Wow. If no animal wants to eat my food, then I don't want to eat it. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
If like an insect or a bug or something won't go near it, you shouldn't go near it. In a perfect world. Again, like, I get it. We're all human.
I understand. Yeah. I mean, I know we're speaking in ideals right now, and if you could set up your perfect life and your perfect world, and you could dial everything in and have the perfect food process, then amazing. But even if you can't do all of these things, just something.
Yeah, like we said, even if it's just growing your herbs, or it's just once a month you do a big shop at a farmer's market that you can get to. Like every little bit helps. Every little bit is helping support a better future, a better system. Every little bit is helping, your health. Like even if you've just got a tiny little bit of, one room for one veggie patch, just even growing a few things.
Yeah.
Better for everything, better all around, but also even just makes you more in touch with your food and understand. You'll respect food and waste less food if you grow 2 things. I honestly believe that we would have way less food waste in this world if everyone just grew one thing. Because once you see how much love and time and effort goes into growing food, even if it's just a herb, even if it's just a tomato vine, even if it's just an zucchini, once you see that, I truly believe you just cannot waste food at the same degree.
Just because you're more in touch with the process.
Yeah, once you just see how much water, how much time, how much sunlight it needs, how long it takes, you will just have a better respect for food and all sorts and where it comes from. And, maybe when you go to the farmer's market, something's a little bit more expensive produce-wise, like cucumbers, they need so much water. Like a cucumber is like 95% water. So much water goes into growing cucumbers. When I grow them, it's like I got to water this twice a day or like they die. They need so much water.
Yeah, right.
Because it basically is just water. So then maybe when you're at the farmer's market and you see cucumbers and they're a little bit more expensive, you'll understand why, because so much went into growing that cucumber. So if everyone just grew a little bit, just something to understand how hard growing something is, I do believe the world would be a better place and we would have far less food waste.
I couldn't agree more. And I believe that diversifying where everybody gets their food is definitely going to create a way better future for us in Australia as well, because
and bringing community back. It's, if you are nailing growing potatoes and you're just like the spud queen, then it's like, we don't need everyone growing a little bit. That's really hard. Being able to grow a few things and nailing it, and then having that space to then seasonal. So say if you're just growing only in winter or only in spring or something, then the rest of the time you can be regenerating that soil. And then maybe your neighbor or your friend or your partner or your family member is growing something at a different time, so then your soil can sit and regenerate before you grow the next thing. And then you give them a bunch of potatoes and garlic, and then you get rhubarb off them.
And there are communal patches as well, right? Like there's actually quite a lot around, at least in Melbourne.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of communal patches where you can go and you can get your own little plot, even if it's something like the size of this table, where you can plant some stuff and tend to it and share the load with other people. Once again, it does all take time, but
normally when you get it, it's like when something's growing, you get so many of that thing. Like when my zucchinis are hot, they're hot. Like you see how many flowers we've got on the vines outside.
Yeah.
When they're ready, we're going to have so many zucchinis.
Yeah.
So being able to share that, with our community, and then at another time, other people grow other things, they share it with us. Like I do believe that's, a key point to saving the future of our food.
And if everybody could just imagine if, I don't know how many people, but imagine if some portion of people diverted some of their buying to smaller growers and smaller suppliers, as opposed to getting it from big conglomerate companies, is going to have such a positive effect on the prices of food and the quality of food around the country. Like you said, voting with your dollar, I think when it comes to food, is one of the most important ways you can do it, because realistically one of the main reasons why food gets so expensive from these big stores is because they have the monopoly. Have the monopoly, and then they can begin choosing the price that works best for them for profit.
Yeah, and you saw it happen a few years ago with milk, cow's milk.
Yeah.
And there was the dollar milk, and basically we don't want any big corporation growing all our food.
We don't want a monopoly on our food.
No, that's a really scary place to be. By keeping small farmers and small businesses who grow food and sell food in business, even if they're more expensive than big corporations like Woolworths and Coles and Aldi, keeping them in business is saving money and the future. Because if they all go out of business and we're relying on, just 1, 2, 3 big corporations to sell us our food. They can price it at anything they want. So the dollar milk, fiasco when they were selling it for $1 and they were dicking their farmers and just like making no money off it. But the whole point is everyone was buying their milk at the supermarkets. So then every other farmer was going out of business, and then then if you could only get milk from a supermarket, then boom, they can charge you $25 for a carton of milk. So like we don't want big corporations having this much control of our food, and the only way to do it is to support small businesses and grow our own. Because also if we all grow our own, well then they won't ever have that pull over us. It's like, oh, well, fuck yeah, I'll just go grow my own. And I know space is limited and we're losing more and more of it, and apartments are going up and people are moving around. So if we can't grow our own, we need to support the small businesses that are. Because if they all go out of business, then the big corporations can charge whatever the fuck they want for their food. And we'd have no choice.
It's not you make such a good point, because it's not a good position to be in. Like it feels fine right now when we're not in a position where people need control necessarily over their own lives. Like everything's all good right now, or seemingly all good. So whether you have control over your own food doesn't really seem important, but there will come a time where food starts to become, or potentially this could happen, where food starts to become so expensive that it's taking up your whole paycheck, just like rent is doing.
Yeah.
And you're imprisoned essentially. Like if there's nowhere else to get food and there's only one place, then I mean, you got to eat, right? You got to eat, or you got to move country, or you got to move state, or you got to go to somewhere where there's cheaper food basically, or you've got to be prepared for the fact of you have no choice and you're spending whatever price they ask.
You're spending the money that they ask by no choice, but also you're eating the food that you have to buy, which
God, yes.
Which then you don't have a say of what's in that. Like what we just talked about with the flour. It's like the government can start putting anything that they think that we should be getting in our diet, in our food, like they do with our water, like they're doing with our food already. And, maybe it's a conversation for another day, but like all this shit might not be good for us.
It might not be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
or even just from the fact that I want to, if it's good for me or not, I want to say of what goes into my body. And then the more food you're having to buy from big corporations, and if they're fully controlling, the food source, then they can put in it whatever we want and we lose complete control. And just remember, nobody makes money if we're all healthy. Sick people make a lot of people money.
That is a really good point. Oh, it's a fuck thing to look at, but it's good to know that little by little people can retake control over their own lives.
I don't have a lot of like positivity or hope in other areas, but this is something like I'm so passionate about, that I really believe that a lot of people doing just a lot of small changes can make some mass change
for sure
to the world and our health. And I do believe that this isn't a lost cause.
Yeah, and
we're so far from that.
We're not far from.
Go to a farmer's market and you'll just be filled with so much fucking hope about food.
Exactly, yeah. When you don't go to those places and you don't look in the right areas, it can begin to seem hopeless. And, some people feel differently about it. Some people want to stick their head in the sand and basically think that the water's perfectly healthy for us, there's nothing bad in it, and the food's perfectly healthy for us and there's nothing bad in it, and so on and so forth. But the reality is there's been time and time again now where, I'm not saying every company, but a lot of the time it has been proven fact that there's been pesticides or chemicals put on plants, put on food that isn't good for humans.
Yeah.
And that has been proved time and time again. So it's no longer a conspiracy. And it's the same with water as well. We know we put certain things in the water to be able to, for whatever reason, but keep the pipes clean, so on and so forth. We put things on water to maintain it. And we know that some of those things consumed in high quantities potentially isn't good for people, you know? So
we put things on our wheat and our corn, which then we harvest to feed our cattle.
Yeah.
So then that goes in it, and then you eat the cattle and the beef, and then you're consuming it that way. Or it rains and it all gets in our waterways, and then we're showering in it. It's raining. It's like it's everywhere.
And the reality is, whether you believe in this stuff or not, or whether you've looked into it or not, the problem is, and I feel like every human would feel the same with this one, is as soon as you don't have control, you don't have a choice. So then you are purely relying on trust. And that's when I guess every person's got to ask themselves, and I'm trying to ask myself as well, do I 100% trust where I get everything that goes into my body and into my mind? You know, do I 100% trust it? And the reality is we live in a world where there's so many massive companies trying to make profit and do dodgy shit that it would be reasonable to say that you can have a certain level of doubt or distrust when it comes to big companies, because that's just how it goes. And the reality is the only way that you can have any choice over any of those things entering your mind or your body is to have some control. And the only way to have control is to be independent and know these sources. And the only way to be independent is taking some of this production and intelligence and information about where to source things from into your own hands. And I guess the reality is right now the only way we can do that is becoming a little bit more educated. It's just we don't live in a world where you can just close your eyes and just buy stuff from people and expect it to be all good. Sometimes you can. A lot of the time you can, but there's some times where you really can't. And if you don't have the information or the education, I barely do, you really don't know and you've got no control.
And like cooking, like so perfectly said. And cooking from scratch has so many benefits in so many different areas that for me, it's like it's an easy win. Like if you want to do something good for your health, the planet, your wallet, your mental state, like, you know, cooking can be a therapy. It can be a form of mindfulness. It can be a form of, it can be a meditative experience. It's like we need to eat. So it's like if you can get all that from something that you have to do kind of, you know, once a day at a minimum anyway, then like it's an easy win.
Yeah, like if you got to eat, you got to eat anyway.
Yeah, so it's like if you want to do something good for your health and the environment and save some money, it's like we got to eat anyway. So for me, it's like this would be the best place to start to just improve quality of life and quality of the world. And you got to do it anyway. And so like this is like the fundamental like reasons why we do what we do at Elise Alexandra is because we want to be a source to make cooking from scratch so easy and enjoyable, but also fucking tasty and delicious, because that's how it will be ongoing and it'll become like a habit and a passion and a desire is like the food's got to be good. And sadly, there are a lot of recipes out there that don't work. Like I say to you, I can read a recipe and know if it's going to work or know if it's going to be good.
That's a really good point. Like how many Instagram reels, YouTube shorts, TikTok videos, whatever you see of people making stuff that is just like, that doesn't work. It's not possible.
Yeah, I do see it a little bit. But the good thing is like with content creators and stuff I see online, it's not like, oh, I see one person and it's like, that's all, oh, like that's mostly good, but that, you know, 20% of it's not going to work. It's kind of like they either got their shit together or they don't. So that's really good because it means like if you find someone you like and you make one or two of their recipes and they're really good, normally they are all going to work or like have their writing style, because people write recipes in different ways. There is a good way and a bad way to write a recipe. Like it's people think it's just easy, but it's like there is actually to make sure that it's easy to follow, for the person to follow, read the way that like our mind works. Like there's, you know, ways to put the steps in that is going to make it easier for a person.
That makes sense to me because I tell you what, I don't know what it is with me and I can read perfectly fine, but as soon as it comes to trying to follow a recipe, I'm looking back and forth from the food to the recipe, and I get lost.
Yeah.
It gets hard. So I know for sure
It's
if
like
recipes aren't written well, it fucking sucks.
It's like it's kind of like trendy now, and I get it looks pretty, but it just doesn't functionality. It's like not having steps. So like not having 1, 2, 3, 4, like in a method of following a recipe.
Like in cookbooks?
Yeah, it's just like having it as like a paragraph. And like it looks better. Like as someone who is sees the back end of designing books and layouts and everything that goes into it, like it's constantly a battle with, we want it to look beautiful, but we will never take that over just like easeability and accessibility and being able to follow that recipe. So like we look at some cookbooks and it's like that looks beautiful as like a paragraph as a recipe, but how the fuck are you meant to follow that? Or like even if someone was taking over, you'd just be like, oh, I'm running in the shower. Can you just I'm up to step 3.
Yeah.
Or like every time you'd have to start from the start and you'd be like, where am I at to? So there are better and worse ways to write recipes. So also just find someone that you like how they write.
Well, I guess you've got a pretty clear idea of the way that people read recipes, right? Because you're constantly getting feedback from all of your customers and all the people buying all of your books, trying to work it out, right? At all points. So you can see every point that they get stuck on or what point.
No one gets stuck.
No one.
No one gets stuck with our recipes. No one asks questions, and that's why they're so perfectly written.
That's a good point, actually. That's a good point. But you see people, you still have people like highlighting certain areas or messaging you about stuff that they like and certain parts of the recipes that they like. So you can see like you're constantly getting feedback about the parts that work. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I want to know, moving on from how the whole world's getting destroyed from our
So
food
just
supply
quickly
and
actually
everything.
on that.
Okay, yeah.
Why I think Simple Sourdough works so well as a cookbook is I haven't written it as like a baker, because I'm not a baker. I haven't trained in baking. I'm not a professional baker. I have written it as a layperson who just understands how to bake sourdough. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's like just you're your person, not a baker. They're not trained, and there's no like fancy words. There's no fancy talk. It's just like me, a friend explaining to another friend how they would make sourdough.
Yeah.
So I guess the term, like just like the recipes, like the title, Simple Sourdough, the recipes are simple, but it's simply explained like friend to friend. And I think we do that a lot with our recipes, which we're not chefs. We don't claim to be. We haven't ever any of us ever studied any like culinary skills.
Yeah.
And so that's why our recipes work, because it's just like friend to friend. We're not trying to be almost like a teacher. Like we're more just like on par. So we're like we're talking the same terminology, the same words, like we're using it all. We're having a discussion.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of it.
For the average person just trying to work it out.
Yeah, because it just comes from an average person who worked it out, which is me.
It's a good point. I think everybody should have a crack at making sourdough personally, because having it around the house, thanks to you.
You make your loaves. You just don't get a chance to make your own loaves, because I'm always making.
Because you're always making it. But I think it's one of the best things. Like when your whole house smells of bread, like it smells like a home. The quality of it is way better. It feels way like how many people complain about bread being like making them feel shit, you know, like, oh fuck, I can't eat bread.
Yeah.
Because it wrecks my guts.
It's like you might not be gluten intolerant, you're just eating shit bread.
100%. And I feel like that's so many
Sorry, you
people
might not be a celiac, you're just eating shit bread.
Yeah. Or you're eating shit bread that makes you gluten intolerant. I don't know if that's a thing, but I feel like eating shitty bread with trash flour and trash ingredients and trash chemicals in it, and like
a lot of people who can't stomach bread or have problems eating wheat or bread in Australia can go to Europe and they can eat bread all day, every day, and not have bloating or gas or stomach issues, because in
it's
Europe,
the folate.
Because in Europe
It's
they
the
don't
fucking
put
folate.
anything in their flour. It is just flour. Like it is just wheat. It is just wheat grain. And Yeah, so a lot of people, and I was the same when I went to Europe in 2015. Like I've never really felt good eating bread here in Australia. And then I ate so much bread in like Italy and felt fine. And my stomach didn't act up or didn't react.
It's a thing. It is a real thing. Everyone should eat sourdough.
Tell you what's not a real thing?
What?
IBS. Irritable bowel syndrome.
All right, talk to me.
Well,
Tell
we're just
me.
speaking of like intolerance and doctors
Yeah.
like, oh, you've got irritable bowel syndrome. It's like your bowel is irritable because something is making it irritable.
Something's irritating it.
Something is irritating it. We don't just like one day just like your bowel's like, I'm going to be irritating now. And we just call, oh, you've just got IBS. Like, sorry, you've just got irritable bowels. Like that's just it. Like your bowels are just irritated. Just one day it decided to be irritated.
Like it's a permanent disease.
It's a permanent disease that you have no control over, that you can't prevent, you can't cure, you can't fix. You just got irritable bowel syndrome. You just got IBS. Fucking hate when people say they've got IBS. No, I don't hate it. I hate Western medicine and the system that makes people believe that they just have to or need to live with irritable bowels because nothing can cure it. It breaks my heart. Doesn't make me angry. It breaks my heart. So like, you know, with the wheat thing and people eating bread, maybe it's just there's something that's irritating your bowels. So if you can, you know, do elimination diets or keep food diaries is a really good way to understand like what's working for you and what not, or maybe you can have it in small doses. So also tracking like quantities of that. But it's like irritable bowel syndrome is curable. There is something that is irritating your bowels that you need to cut out, or you need to take probiotics and prebiotics and build your gut health. So then your gut has a huge diverse system, or, you know, the microbiome is full of millions of different, trillions of different good bacterias, which is what probiotics and prebiotics is. So then it can fight the things better so it doesn't feel irritable. Just wanted to put that in.
No, it's another really
you
good
don't
point.
have to live with IBS.
So it's treatable. It's curable.
It's treatable. And a lot of people that have those symptoms in reaction to eating bread do not have them when eating sourdough because it's already fermented, so it's pre-digested, so it's way less harsh on your gut when you're eating wheat because it's kind of it's already been broken down, so your gut doesn't have to break it down as much because it's already pre-fermented.
I would say that if people just enacted all of the things that you just spoke about in terms of just basic food consumption, all the way down to the bread as well, I feel like that would cure so many people's like everyday ailments and things that just fuck with them. IBS being one of them, achy joints, arthritis, all these things. I feel a lot of them would be solved or remedied like massively from just eating clean, eating healthy, and getting the shit out of your diet.
Yeah, for sure. I believe that.
Yeah, food is such a big one, and it really can't be understated how important it is. This whole conversation, like it's something that I do think about, you know, on a daily basis anyway, but I can't say that I'm in any way, shape or form educated on the matter really, you know what I mean? But it's starting to get to a point where using common sense and just looking at the way food gets to us is it's becoming so blatantly obvious that there seems to be a problem, right? And like I mentioned it to you earlier, we were talking about it with all this is a sort of a side note, but it's crazy anyway about what's happening in Germany with all of the farmers. If anyone out there has seen videos of farmers in Germany from all around Germany have got in their tractors and they've flooded the streets of major cities with, looks like there's like thousands of tractors there just basically blockading the city because they're protesting the tax on diesel in Germany that they've implemented. I don't know the exact details of it, so I don't know what this tax is or like how much more expensive it makes everything. But
Clearly enough to
if thousands
drive
and
a tractor into the city.
Driving a tractor can't be cheap into the city for starters.
City, yeah.
And so it must be costing them fucking heaps. And it's basically putting a massive strain on farmers and a massive strain on the food supply once again. And if it's costing the farmers this much that they're getting pushed to a point where they have to charge more for their produce, and then either two things are happening. The massive companies there are either buying the produce for more expensive from the farmers and then selling it more expensive for the people, or they're just not buying from certain farmers and they're only buying for the farmers who are willing to give in and willing to charge basically illegal prices, so they're almost making nothing.
Yeah.
In a sense, so they can make the bottom line and make the profit off their food. So nothing to do with the food in Australia, but
it worked, didn't it?
It worked. Well, once again, I don't know. I saw like two videos, and like an article that said that they managed to achieve the reversal of this tax hike. I don't know if they did.
Yeah.
Once again, another thing we've got to look up. But if they did, that's pretty cool, because it really does show that there's more of us. There's more of us.
Yeah, there's more consumers than
we forget sometimes that we still control what happens to a massive degree if we're willing to make certain sacrifices. Basically, like what we're saying, if you're willing to just sacrifice a little bit of your energy and a little bit of your time now.
And also if you're willing to like speak out.
Yeah. Have conversations like this. Like one of the things that I really want out of this podcast, I really don't want to feel like I'm sitting here with yourself or any other guest, like we're just preaching to everybody and telling everybody how to live. I want quite the opposite, because I feel like I don't know. And all I have really is questions.
Yeah, we just want conversations.
I just want to promote conversations for people. So other people just like us out there in their homes, with their family, with their loved ones, with their employer, with their supplier, their grocer, whoever the fuck it is, just start having these conversations.
Or just
and start
even
asking
if we're
questions.
Not, yeah, like don't mean to preach, but also just like thought-provoking conversations. It's like, maybe you do nothing but just having this in just having to think about it. So at least what you're choosing to do is a conscious decision, not something that you feel is the only decision, or you're, like you're pushed with it without even understanding through like marketing and advertising. So it's like, do what you want, but just have all the information so you know what you're doing is a decision to be eating like that, consuming like that, purchasing like that. Don't do it because you feel like it's the only option.
Yeah, like if everybody 100% believed that there was chemicals in your food and it was way too expensive and it was possible to get it cheaper, and if everyone did believe that and everybody did have the time and did have the money to be able to go and source food from better places and have clean living, obviously everyone would fucking do it.
Yeah.
Like everybody would do it, because everybody likes feeling great, and everybody does feel good when they're consuming good food. Like that's what we are. We are the water we drink. We are the food we eat. We are the air we breathe. Like that is what we are.
You are what you eat.
You are what you eat. And that is very, very true. And the reality is everybody would live the way that you've described if they felt like it was possible and they felt like it was worth it. And
I was going to say, felt like it was worth it is the key thing there.
And they felt like it was worth it, right? Yeah. And the reality is the only reason why it doesn't feel like it's worth it is because it doesn't feel like it's that bad. It just doesn't feel like it's that bad. But I don't know, when people are just getting more and more diseases, more and more ailments, more and more problems, like you got to look somewhere, right? Like where the fuck is it coming from?
Yeah.
Like people are getting sick at higher and higher rates, it seems.
But also people are getting sicker. So look, when something feels confusing to me, it's like just look in the past and look at, what people were doing 50, 60, 70 years ago. It's like we just need to get back to basics. You know, like everything is increasing. Like, you know, even just like learning difficulties, ADHD, like trouble focusing, everything is just like, you know, like there's more new things that are popping up everywhere, and it's like, let's just look where we didn't have these issues. What were we doing?
Of course. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, there's obviously other things that can cause this stuff other than food, but a lot of it is food related, and a lot of it can be remedied via food as well. Like when you talk about what was happening 50, 60, 70 years ago, like my father is 77 years old, and he grew up in Tasmania, and at that point in time in Tasmania, the idea of the quarter acre block that everybody had was the point of there was enough room to have a house that could sleep, you know, your nuclear family, so mum, dad, and however many kids. You had a house big enough to do that, and then there was enough land on the property to be able to grow a garden big enough to be able to feed that family. So that's why that sort of size land was designed. And this is what everybody did. This is what he did. This is what they all did. And this wasn't that long ago. And they ate most of the food they grew. You know, you have a Sunday roast or whatever, like you get an animal once a week or something like that. Like you're not eating meat 3 times a fucking day.
Yeah.
You know, you're eating vegetables throughout the week. Maybe you're drinking milk, and then you have some meat on the weekends. Maybe some leftovers throughout the week. And that milk was
probably raw milk.
Yeah, it was raw milk. It wasn't pasteurized. To the shit and just completely destroyed. Yeah, and so there was a time not that long ago where this is where the average family existed like this. And now we live in a time, at least within Australia, where to have your own quarter acre block is so expensive that most people can't do it. Most people can't afford a house that has enough space to be able to do this in, which sucks, and I don't really know an answer to it. I don't know how to fix that. I have no idea, basically.
Well, we've given a few small good tips.
Yeah. When it comes to the food, we've got some small tips, but when it comes to, I don't know, giving people a way to have their own space, because the reality is there is enough space to be able to grow good food, but the question is we just don't know what's happening to that food that's being grown in that space. For each person or each small community to grow their own food seems like pretty unrealistic right now. But
also people talk about, there's no space to grow food. No one has space to grow food. There is so many gardens and no food is being grown. Like, I'm not even preaching that everyone should grow food. I'm maybe just suggesting that the people that have the space do. Because there is like so many people. Like, think about how many gardens you see and no food is being grown. And like that isn't the case. Like when we were in Tassie and you walk around Tassie and every fucking garden has a veggie patch
Tasmania's
or a fruit
amazing.
tree. Yeah, there's just fruit off all the trees.
Yeah.
And that's what it would look like. We don't have that in Melbourne. You don't see any fruit trees. You don't see any produce being grown. So I'm not even saying like everyone needs some space to grow. I'm just saying maybe 50% of the people that had the space started growing some food, we could make some serious changes in this world. Like, I don't think it needs to be an everything thing. I just think the people that have the space should try out growing some stuff.
100%. And I think it potentially has to be.
Tassie, like everyone has veggie gardens.
Tasmania is amazing.
They all grow their own food. They all have the boxes out the front where they sell it. You know, just honesty system. They've got a bag of too many apples because they've got an apple tree. Yeah, like
it's a cultural thing.
It's not an all or nothing thing. There is so many gardens here, front gardens, back gardens. We have a lot of people have space and have gardens in Melbourne and in Victoria and in Australia. Just they're not growing in them.
Yeah.
So like that's where I struggle with the conversation around like, but people don't have the space. It's like, no, not everyone does. But I want to promote and advertise. If you have the space, then give it a go to just grow something.
And so on that, if people do want to grow things at home, a question that has popped into my mind is, well, if all the soil is supposedly reducing in its quality and its, mineral density and everything else, microbial content in the soil, if all of that's reducing and it's becoming less ample, then when everyone goes to Bunnings or wherever the fuck they go to get their soil to be able to plant stuff at home, would it be right to assume that potentially the soil that they're buying is also not very good or not very high quality?
Well, I feel like there's like 20 different types of soils that you can buy at Bunnings.
Like if the soil in the ground is shit.
Yeah, the cheapest one you can buy,
Bunnings?
I think you can buy it like $1.50, like a bag. And then there's, bags that are like $20 or $30 a bag. So definitely like the premium soil, I don't believe is like a crock of shit. Like that soil is going to have better stuff in it, better nutrients.
So you don't think it's just a scam? More expensive soil and cheap soil, but it's all the same soil?
Nah, I even just can see and feel like they look completely different.
Okay. All right.
Like the one that's really cheap is really dry compared to one that's the premium soil is quite wet. But you can buy like magnesium and algae and seaweed and all these different, like nutrients that then you just put a cap full in like a watering can and then water your soil with that. So there's also like a lot of stuff that you can buy that lasts forever, that isn't that cheap, that isn't that expensive, that can add nutrients to your soil.
Okay, so it's doable.
Yeah. So you could buy the cheap soil and then buy like a bucket of, I'm blanking on all the stuff I have in my garage, but
like sea salt, that stuff.
Yeah, like there's lots of stuff that you can buy that literally lasts you forever that is putting nutrients in the soil. Or my favorite, you can have a compost and then that puts nutrients back in the soil. You can have a worm farm that then that liquid, when you water the worm farm and that liquid that drains out, so full of nutrients.
So you use a compost and a worm farm?
Yeah. So I use that to regenerate my soil in between like growing things and harvesting things.
Does that take up a lot of space? Like do you need a lot of area to have those things?
A worm farm, they're not too big, but they're kind of more of a hard spot because you don't really want it in your house. Like they don't look that pretty. Awesome if you have it in your house, good on you. But I have mine in the garage, but you can't just have them like outdoors because they will get too hot. Like it's a temperature thing. You can't have them in really, really cold places and you can't have them in really, really hot places.
But worms are everywhere.
Huh?
Worms are out in the ground and it gets hot.
Yeah,
and cold
but I guess like this is a plastic makeup thing.
Yeah, so in the ground is
they can protect, like they could just chill and move and like
that makes sense.
I definitely don't think that we can make something that's going to give better than the natural environment of the ground.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But also, who better can explain all this and give lots of tips on this is my sister Elise has a podcast all about like the suburban gardener or the city gardener, like basically growing stuff from home, every and any home.
Yeah, we can plug that right now, by the way. It's called Rooting For You Pod.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Rooting For You Pod.
Yeah. So I would 100%, and each episode is a different vegetable. So if you only want to grow, and there's also episodes like composting or setting up the perfect garden or what.
This is basically like a one-stop shop, like everything you need to know.
Everything you could need to know. And she's not talking like, growing like on farmland and selling it. This is just for like the purposes that we've been talking about in this podcast.
Yeah.
So Rooting For You, it's on Spotify, podcasts, everywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. There's an Instagram, which is really cool because then that'll show you when new episodes come up and there's lots of photos of all the stuff Elise grows. So that would be if you want to grow something, start listening to that.
And this whole podcast revolves around her garden that she's got out at like your family home in Mount Macedon.
Doesn't really revolve around that. It doesn't revolve
around that?
No. Like it's her co-host Tess asks a lot of questions about just growing stuff anywhere. So like it doesn't really link to the space that she has.
Okay, yeah.
The photos, but then she might reference it, but it really is just for like the everyday person with kind of no matter what setup they have.
Yeah. Oh, well, people go check that out. Listen to that. won't take you too long, and then go make a garden.
Yeah, they're like
Go do
quick,
it.
snappy, like easy to follow recipes. Oh my God. Yes, I write cookbooks. Episodes.
And with the composting, just quickly, so do you think that you would be able to get, regardless of the kind of, hopefully you have good quality soil that you've bought, if you have less quality soil, with just by composting, would you be able to replenish that soil to a high quality soil over the space of like a year or something like that?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Like I put my compost on my veggie patches once a year.
Yeah.
And
it's another thing that you're doing anyway. Like you're creating all of this waste from all of the home cooking that everyone's started to do because they've listened to this.
it's the beautiful cycle of life, composting. Like people think it's dirty, smelly business. It's not. Like your scraps, your food scraps literally turn into soil. Like you just put them in a compost, you turn it every day and it doesn't get smelly, doesn't get rotten, it doesn't stink. It turns into soil. Like when I empty it out to put it on my garden, it just looks like soil. And it's the beautiful cycle of life that my food scraps get composted, turn into soil, and then goes back onto my garden to then help grow the new food that I'm growing. Like
it's almost like
magic.
It was how it was meant to be done.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy how well it all works.
So another way that a lot of people rejuvenate their soil or like focus on soil health is to have like chickens, because their shit is really, really good for soil health. My sister in Rooting For You talks a lot about that as well, as she has chickens. They scratch up the dirt, they rejuvenate it, they air it. And their shit is like a really good kind of compost on the soil. But obviously that is like a way harder barrier to be able to have chickens.
So whoever's out there who's in a 1-bedroom apartment,
just get some chickens.
You've got your bed in one corner, your kitchen in the other, and then you got your worm farm and your chickens. Your chickens.
Maybe they got the chickens.
Your
I'm
chickens.
only saying it because
this isn't on you. This is just me laughing at the whole system.
I'm only saying it because your chickens can do a lot more than lay eggs for you. It's just what I'm saying. They're very, very talented ladies, very special.
It's so much to think about, but it's good to know that there are small steps that can be taken.
I truly believe that, yeah.
Towards creating a better future, and it gives me a lot of hope that it's a powerful thing that in a small or large way every person can do, whether you've got heaps of money or whether you're broke as fuck. There's still something that you can do to be able to push forward in that direction. Yeah. And it seems pretty clear. Like people who eat well, people who cook their own food derive so much happiness out of it. The more effort that you put into sourcing what you eat and what you consume, the more rewarding it is when you consume it. The more that feeds into a general feeling of well-being in life.
Yeah.
I feel.
And it does. Like we didn't even go into like all the, the positive mental benefits of cooking from scratch. But like if you cook a meal, you're more likely to sit down and take time to eat it and be present and
appreciate it, right?
Appreciate it, exactly. You're more likely to sit down with a friend or a partner or a loved one or a book even, have a date with yourself, romanticize it, than just like plonk yourself on the couch and scoff a meal that like, you just got from the front door from the delivery person. Like the benefits like are just so strong even as you consume that food. Like you're just more likely to sit down and have conversations with people and be mindful while you're eating and eat slower and be more appreciative that you have food, because every meal is a gift. If you're sitting down to a meal, that's not a given. Like it's not a right or a given that we have food in this world. There's plenty of people that go out without. So when you cook it from scratch, I do believe have more gratitude for that meal, the surroundings that you're eating that meal and the opportunities that you've had that have brought you to having that meal.
A little bit more gratitude for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good point you make. And I'm a hard believer in if you genuinely do sit down whilst you're eating and appreciate what you're eating because you put in hard work and you actually just try and be aware. Sounds a bit woo-woo, but be aware of what you're eating and what it's doing to you. Like you will start to be able to, I believe that it feels like you can start to pick up and feel exactly what it's doing to you. Like you won't be in the dark about how food affects you as much because if you just sit down and just turn off everything else and enjoy your meal and then think about how you feel whilst you're eating it and think about how you feel after you've eaten it and potentially even the next day whilst remembering what you ate, just being conscious of that process, you'll start to know pretty quickly like what you're eating that's making you feel good and what you're eating that's making you feel like trash. Like
for sure.
I feel like people innately have that ability and we've just kind of lost it because like you said, we're just sitting there, Uber driver rocks up, we get the bag of shit, we're watching TV, we got Netflix, we got TikTok, we got Instagram,
we
got
don't
all
live
this
in a
shit
society anymore that like that being intuitive is a positive thing.
Being intuitive is frowned upon. You can't have your own feelings about things
or own thoughts, or being intuitive as a woman is being too emotional, or you know, all the negative things that come with that. So it's like I don't think we're praised for being intuitive anymore, but we need more of that.
You're so right. Intuition has been totally attacked. Like now if
you talk about intuition, it's like, oh, woo-woo.
Woo-woo. Oh, you don't trust the facts if you're being intuitive because it's better to listen to a trusted source out there, verified and trusted, than yourself.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, right? Because I feel like one of the most beneficial things that you can learn to do as a human, I'm trying to do it, I feel like I can't do it, but I'm trying, is learn to listen to yourself. Listen to your own mind, what it's saying. Listen to your own body, what it's saying. Like, listen to all that shit.
Yeah, you know best. I think
people do know best.
I think they do. And I think if they learn to sit with that and believe that they know best, then they will have the answers and they will have intuition. I do believe it's like a muscle. Like you use it or lose it.
Yeah.
Like you got to be present and open to receiving messages from your body. And if you don't listen to your body for a certain amount of time, your body will stop sending you messages.
I agree. I think we've got to give every person deserves a lot more credit for their ability to know what's good and bad for them. And I think that we're kind of live in a world at the moment where the general vibe, the general atmosphere of society is that people don't know what's best for them and people need to be told what's best for them. And so every bit of information is telling you what's best for you, with a one-size-fit-all sort of message that is just so confusing and not helpful at all, where the reality is every human's amazing. Every human does have the power and the ability to be able to work out what's best for them if they're given a little bit of space and a little bit of time and they can get a little bit of space from all the fucking shit that they get bombarded with on a day-to-day basis. People got it. People know what to do, it seems. They've been doing it for a million fucking years.
Yeah.
Eating things, working out what's good, working out, like, everything we have is from people trusting their intuition, and now we're living in a state where we're told that that's not okay.
Yeah.
It's like people can work out what's good for them. If you sit down and you eat a meal, you'll know whether it's good for you or bad if you start thinking about it.
Yeah, or just taking the time to see how you feel after that meal.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Ellen, I think we should wrap it up here. I could talk for hours about this, and I'm sure we will at another point in time. I really do appreciate you coming on and just having a conversation about this. I know that I'm definitely not an expert with this stuff, and I do not proclaim to know anything about this. But once again, the message of this podcast is just stop worrying about the answers and start worrying about the questions.
Yeah, perfect.
And you've raised a lot of really, really good questions in my mind, so I appreciate that. And you've made me think about it a little bit more. And thank you for doing everything that you do and spending your life focusing on food.
No worries. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Before we go, if anybody has been inspired to make sourdough or check out anything else, like how do people get your book? Where do people find you?
Yeah, find it and all the other cookbooks at elisealexandra.com. Elise spelled ALYCE, alexandra.com. My book's up there. It's in digital format, which can be accessed all around the world. If you purchase that, that's emailed to you immediately, or we can ship it to you throughout Australia and New Zealand from that website.
Perfect. And also pantry design opportunity for anybody who wants it.
Yes, someone give me that job, please.
It won't be cheap, but it will be fucking good. So if you need that, reach out as well. You can find you on Instagram and everything like that as well.
Yep. Hello, it's .ellen.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciated the chat. We'll do it again.
Sounds good. See ya.
Sounds good. Peace out, everybody.